Hey everyone, it is I, Jack, and I decided to make another video, a spoiler video discussing a lot of the biggest moments, shocking moments in the Sandman. So, if you have not seen this show, don't watch this, watch my other video, where I basically just ooze all over the show, but watch the show. I highly recommend you watch the show. If you don't like being spoiled, then so be it. Stick around, pull up a chair, and let's discuss. And I will do my best to explain why this show was so amazing. So, with that, and I'll explain a little bit more in depth as to why I think some of the episodes, I think if we really want to look at this show, 10 hours, right? 10 hours. It's, in reality, it's one story from episode 1 to 5, then 6 to maybe 7. It's another, or maybe 6 on its own. 6 might be on its own, really. And then 7, 8, 9, and 10 are the last story. And you know what? Yeah, that's really how it breaks down, because now that I'm thinking about it, the episode you'll probably hear most people talk about, which is called The Sound of Her Wings. Fuck! Did that episode break me? Now, this episode, The Sound of Her Wings, in reality, if you think about it, it's 2 stories. You're seeing Death. You finally meet Death, his sister. And she's explained to him basically why she thought it was going to be a hard task to be that person, to be that final face that humans see when they are finally at their passing point. And it's also Dream's way of trying to understand humans a little bit more. So what better way to understand humanity than to see them at the very end? I'll tell you this, when you see her going from person to person, oh, it's heartbreaking, especially the first person. When you see Death go to the old man and he just asks for one more moment to do his prayer, oh God, it broke me. It broke me. I'm an atheist, okay? But the final act that you do in your life, it says a lot about a person, I think. And for that man, who I'm assuming had a pretty fair life, he just had one more thing, and like he mentions, I believe he says that his dad told him to say that prayer before you pass away. And I guess for him, it's just like I think he mentions it just to ensure him he goes into heaven. It's that fear, But when you see it happening, there's a melancholy to it. It's just heartbreaking. It broke me. To be honest, it broke me. And also when you see her approach the guy who's coming out of the lake, who he thinks, just took a swim, but in reality, he had drowned. And the last thing he wants to do is he wants to just tell his wife, here's the code to the plane tickets, don't worry, you're not going to struggle getting home. But unfortunately, sometimes when death comes, there's no opportunity for you to settle things. And that's what broke me about that episode. And I think that's why a lot of people are breaking, because you don't see this in movies or in TV shows, the final moments of death. You see them as a gross gore fest, but you don't see the personal side of it. You don't see how your passing, how it affects. You don't see the ripple effect. It's like when you throw a stone into a pebble into the lake or into a water. You know how it goes, that ripple? You don't see how when you pass, there's a ripple effect. And you have no control over what happens, what that ripple is. Is it a positive or a negative? You have zero control. And this episode, it shows you just that. And oh, it's heartbreaking. Ah, it's heartbreaking. But it's beautiful. It is so it's beautifully told, crafted. The things you see Death and Dream talking about, it's thought-provoking. It's an amazing episode. And for me, it's kind of the point of the show. The fact that it's very thought-provoking, and it's trying to make you think about, and I believe that's how the graphic novel is too. It's trying to show you morality in some sort of way without you actually having to think about it, but it's amazing. But in that second half of that episode, though, it's more, it changes because it's no longer about death, and I think that's a smart thing to do, because if you had a whole hour of just seeing Death go to people, even a baby, and say, "I'm sorry, your time is up," I don't know. I think it would have gone on too long. The viewer might have just gotten it would have been too much for the viewer. They would have eventually gotten desensitized to it, and the effect wouldn't be there. So when it switches to the story of him meeting up with this guy every 100 years to understand humanity, that was so well crafted too, and so well told, and actually the point he wanted, what I think what Dream wanted, was to understand why a human would continue wanting to live even though they have a shitty life. They still wouldn't take their life. They still wouldn't want end. They wouldn't cry out to say, "I am done, kill me." They still wouldn't. They would still try to see hope or find a way to get out of the predicament. And the guy kept doing that every few 100 years. I think it was 1 century where he had a shitty century. He had 80. He mentions for the first 20 years it was great. The last 80 were hell. But he still didn't want to die. He still wanted to keep living. And I think that says a lot about the human condition. We have these moments where we have a shitty life sometimes, or shitty moments, and we think, fuck, it's best to just end it. But then there's always a way out, or there's some sort of path to correct things, or the storm finally ends, and then we find peace. I think that's what that episode is trying to do. It's an amazing episode, amazing. And that's, I think, it is really a standalone episode, because this, from my understanding, the graphic novel is really more of a standalone kind of series. So you have one story here, another story there, and so forth. It's not just this one huge, all connecting series. It's an anthology. So, Sounds of Her Wings. If you haven't seen it yet, it'll break you. But the first part of this series, episodes 1 through 5, are really all about when he gets captured by Roderick Burgess. When he gets captured, and then you see in episodes 2, 3, 4, and then ultimately 5, the ripple effect of what happens. It's really, you see him trying to, it's episode 2, I think, where he's starting to get his belongings, and then ultimately the final belonging is in episode 5, 24/7, which, wow, what an episode. But before I talk about that, the one before it, A Hope in Hell, I guess this is different in the comic book. People in the comments, please educate me on this part. For now, or whatever, I'm gonna read this stuff because I am so interested in finding out how different this show is to the comic. A Hope in Hell the fight with Lucifer, it is literally chess. It's the greatest game of chess you'll ever see, because it's Dream kind of trying to one up Lucifer in, and I guess, emotions, feeling, thought, ideas. I thought it was amazing. I remember it's, you see Dream use, I guess, a weapon or some sort, a blade, but then you see Lucifer use venom, which she turns herself to a snake. But the last thing I think she uses, the one of the last, second before last things, was, I guess, fear or despair. But then he uses hope to win, and hope is just something that's so powerful in anybody, regardless of your faith. It's just one of the human conditions, to hope, for the best and so forth. It's an amazing fight. It's the smartest fight you'll ever see. You in other movies you see, a guy fights the devil, or a guy fights this demon, and it's a clash of crucifixes and shit. This is so different, but it was smart. So I'm not sure what the original character was, but regardless, it worked on the show. It worked for the progression of the show. But then the next one, episode 5, 24/7. Woo, boy. What can you say about that episode? That's the episode, and I mentioned this in my review. That's the episode where it pretty much points out how there's a dark side to humanity that we don't want to really know. The human condition is really to kind of ignore our deepest, darkest impulses. But when you see, I believe he goes by the character name, when you see David Thewlis, it's his character, John D, who's, from what I remember, he's the descendant of Burgess, Roderick Burgess. You see him start to use the stone, the emerald, and he brings out the worst in people. Oh no, he's not trying to make them evil. That's the weird thing, because he's trying to make them be honest. He's trying to create an honest world. And sometimes, I guess, the whole point of white lies, I guess, and that's really what the episode is trying to, I think, the idea is trying to get expressed, is that the little white lies that we tell in our everyday lives, they are for not the betterment of society, but it's for others, to, I guess, we push people away with little white lies because they really knew who we are. They might be scared, or they might see us as lesser of people. And that episode, when all those things are taken away, you see a very broad spectrum of people. You see, my God, the cook, when he said what he said in that moment, where he basically admits, and I'll be honest, when I heard that, I heard what he said, which is basically that he fucks the waitress's son, the first thing that I thought, I was like, oh my God, he's a pedophile. But then a little bit later, you actually hear that her son is actually in college. It doesn't make it better though, but it fucking was shocking to hear at first. I was like, whoa, what the fuck? But still, you see how a little white lie will cover up a horrible person. A little white lie will cover up this couple who looks happy as hell, but they're just telling each other little white lies to basically make each other feel good. But there's always one person that breaks. The little white lie of of the waitress, being overly sweet with John D, because she fears no one will like her, because she doesn't feel appreciated or valued. So that episode, my God, I'm pretty sure if you go to YouTube, you'll find people reacting to every episode. And like I mentioned, when I was trying to do reaction to this show on episode 1, I just had my jaw on the floor. I was floored by how beautiful it was, how it was like the graphic novel. I didn't say anything, and why would I put up a video of just me with my mouth wide open, So it didn't make sense. I kind of regret it now, because once that episode, oh my God, I was floored. I was emotional and just like, oh my God. So that episode, 24/7, the 5th episode, fucking shocking. But that's the very end of the first story of Dream getting his powers back. But then the next story starts with the Dollhouse, episode 7, which that's where you start to see the conflict of, or also the change, I guess, in Dream, because he's now trying to be more thoughtful, but he's trying to take in or put into practice what he's learned, in with time, with meeting that guy for every 100 years, maybe what he talked about with death. So he's trying to maybe put in practice, but he still can't do it. He's very antisocial. But the Dollhouse sets up the final story, which is with Rose Walker, and how actually her storyline is connected to events in the very first episode, actually. And it's very smart how they did it, but you don't really find out till I think a little bit later. You end up finding out that the little girl in the very first episode, which you briefly see, Unity Kincaid, how she fell asleep for years, had a baby. Well, that ends up being Rose's mother, and Rose is the granddaughter of Unity Kincaid. And then and it goes on to this story with her trying to find her little brother, which when you see what her brother's going through, my God, that fucking sucks. And it's something, and that's what this show does. It sheds light on things that are happening. That in the United States, the foster care system, it's not perfect. It's very flawed. And there has been, cases where foster parents have abused, their foster children, or taken advantage of the system and mistreated the children. Those things happen. But we as a society don't really want to think about it, because it's not pleasant. And I think that's what I really love about this show, is that it reminds you that humanity is not one way. Humanity is very broad, and most people want to keep their view of humanity a certain way, when in reality it's more broad than you want it to be. And ultimately, the fact that she's like the vortex, so she's the Rose Walker's the vortex, and she can technically take over, Dreams' dimension or dominion. It's just it's interesting how it builds up, but I think that's where it kind of falls apart at the very end, which is the very last episode, Lost Hearts, where you realize the dream vortex that is Rose was not supposed to be Rose. It was supposed to be her grandmother. And I don't know if it plays out differently in the comics, but regardless, it was interesting how they did it. It's still a little sad, you know. It's like, oh, you know, Unity Kincaid, she was asleep for, I think it was 40 years or something or more, and all she's been wanting, and you see when you see her introduction, all she's been wanting is to have a life, finally have a life, because she spent half of her life or more than half of her life asleep. All she wants is to experience living, and she just can't. So it's unfortunate, it's heartbreaking for her character, but it makes sense how they did this. And ultimately, when you find out all of this, well, not all of it, because the first half of this story was Roderick Burgess, you know, capturing Dream. That was not planned, but when you find out, oh, Desire took advantage of that moment to mess with things and ultimately be the one who impregnated Unity Kincaid, fuck. It's very I was like, fuck, really? It's so mysterious, and that's why I love the show. The mysterious, it keeps you thinking, like, oh shit, I didn't expect that. So ultimately, I mean, it's a great series, fantastic series. I don't know if they're gonna make a season 2. If they do, I can't wait to see what they do. I mentioned this in my review that this season is supposed to be, I think, volumes 1 and 2, or volumes 1 of the story of Sandman. Whatever they do after this, because there is this big tease where you get Lucifer pretty much saying that we're gonna try to dethrone Dream, we're gonna expand hell. Oh, I'm in for that. So I can't wait. And you know what? If you've seen this show, in the comments, tell me, what did you think? What could have been better? The Corinthian, Boyd Holbrook. I remember him from Logan, and of course the movie Predators. Oh, not Predators. Sorry, The Predator. I thought The Predator was okay, but it still doesn't live up. But in Logan, he's fantastic, and in this show, being the Corinthian, fuck, the way they set that whole thing up, that he is the inspiration, because, and I forgot until they started going back to this story, because he's mentioned in the very first episode. You see him briefly. He was gonna get, he's gonna get destroyed, but because Roderick Burgess pulls Dream, he's saved, and just keeps doing what he's doing from 1905 or whatever year it was. So the Corinthian has been killing people all this time, for centuries, for hundreds of years, and ultimately has this following. And when you see that episodes 9 and 10, which when they well, mainly 10, when you see them at the 9 and 10, when you see them at the cereal convention, it's fucking disturbing, but it's so well done, because you can see people, especially nowadays, have this fandom for something so heinous. And I'm pretty sure, there's a documentary. It's not a real documentary. It's a pseudo documentary called S&M Man, or oddly enough, it's called Sandman if you think about it, which talks about this this guy who's into horror films, and he makes this series, but he gets banned. It gets banned, and it becomes like urban legend in a sense. And ultimately, the guy who's trying to interview to find out who this guy is finds out this guy is ultimately disturbed and just disturbed to the point where he makes his horror real. Horror films aren't doing it for him, so he makes his own, which is to kill people. And that pseudo documentary, for a moment, I thought, this fucking real, but when you look at it, oh, it turns out it's not. But still, the effect, the disturbance, so good. So it's technically it's called Sandman too, but it's something else. So SNM, I recommend you see that too. It works because if you think about the Corinthian, it's kind of like that in the sense that the serial convention, all these people admire and worship the Corinthian and his acts, and have modeled themselves to fulfill their deepest, darkest desire because he's kind of allowing it. Fucking amazing, fucking genius how they did this. So, my final thoughts on this. I mean, it's a masterpiece of a show. Smart to do this in 10 episodes, each one being an hour long. So smart. Because there's no way WB could have told this story like they wanted to. I think 8 or 9 years ago, they wanted to do a 2.5 hour film. There's no way. You can't. You can't even tell one part of the first part of this story. It took 5 hours for him to get all his belongings. It took 5 hours. You can't speed this up. There's so many good characters. And they're so well fleshed out this way. So yeah, I can't stop gushing about this show. So what did you guys think? In the comments, tell me how different it is from the comic. What do you guys think was, I guess, the weakest part of this show? Or not. If you thought it was a masterpiece like I did, fucking go ahead and gush about it like me. But if not, hey, I'm interested. Let's discuss the Sandman. Overall, spoiler it, because this video will be spoiler everything. So go at it. Go at it in the comments. And like always, I thank you for watching, subscribing, liking, sharing. If you share, whatever, everything, I thank you. I can't even believe I have followers, to be honest. So to you who are still watching and following, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It is Jack, and I'll see you on the next one.